Hello and welcome to State of Play on Mint Press News. I'm your host, Greg Stoker, and we are going to be diving right into this episode, tentatively titled Disarray at the Pentagon as Ukraine and Iran Negotiations Reach Critical Points. I don't know. Editor might fix that. Maybe too clickbaity, but you'll see what we come up with after this is published. Mint Press News is a small independent newsroom and, of course, has no corporate sponsors. So if you're interested in supporting independent journalism, consider supporting us on Patreon, linked in the description, plugs over with. If you're getting nickeled and dimed by late-stage capitalism, you, of course, don't have to contribute anything. We're just glad you're here. If you could like, share, subscribe, and spread the word about what we're trying to do here, we would definitely appreciate it. So today we have a guest that's plugged into really what's going on at the Pentagon. We've seen 90 days of drama, or at least a month of heavy drama, starting with the Signalgate. There's been a second Signal chat where Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, was sharing classified information about attacks on Houthi targets with a scheduling group involving his wife, his brother, his lawyer, and other personnel. And this comes on the heels of 3 senior Pentagon officials, including Dave Caldwell, being relieved and fired. According to Politico, 2 of them have started wrongful termination lawsuits. So there's kind of like some fog of war, what's going on there. But it's definitely paints a clear picture that all is not well. So today we are joined by Major General Dennis Laich, who had a distinguished 35-year career in the Army Reserve. The last 14 of those years were spent in various command positions, most recently as commander of the 94th Regional Readiness Command in Fort Devens. Laich holds a bachelor's degree in political science from Lafayette College and a master's degree from West Virginia University and St. Francis College in Business Administration and Labor Relations. He completed postgraduate studies at the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard University and is a graduate of the Army War College. Thank you, Major General, so much for taking the time to come on and talk with us about this.
Appreciate being here.
Yeah, so your areas of expertise. You're also associated with the Eisenhower Media Network, and your areas of expertise are all volunteer force, demographics, conscription, and national military service, senior level military leadership and general officer experience, and Iraq Wars, Persian Gulf to present. You've been on with us before to talk about the recruiting crisis. You definitely voiced reservations about Pete Hegseth as Secretary of Defense. But most recently, you just sent me last night this video of you speaking at a town hall meeting, kind of a rowdy crowd in Columbus, Ohio. And I'd like to just play a clip from that real quick, just so the audience can get a sense of where you stand on what's going on in America.
And honors it. We're sleepwalking toward fascism and surrendering our democracy. I'm not an expert on fascism, but I can tell you this. I can give you some characteristics of it. One-man rule, an authoritarian dictator, a king, maybe a 5-time draft dodger who's now a chicken hawk. The rule of law is destroyed. Free speech is not permitted. No free and fair elections. A concentration of wealth. Sound familiar? I don't know. I do know a bit about the military and about our veterans. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth has made a number of pronouncements. He's made changes to our military, none of which make the DoD more efficient or military more lethal. None of them, not a single one. As a matter of fact, he's destroyed our efficiency and depletes the lethality of our military. Let's start with DEI. With regard to DEI, Secretary Hegseth is...
All right, yeah. So, sorry, having some quick technical difficulties, but yes, we're definitely going to get into all of that. I guess my first question, General, is former top Pentagon spokesperson John Oliot detailed a, quote, month of hell inside the Pentagon related to Signalgate, private dissent, and now the firings of 3 top Pentagon officials under Sec Def Hegseth. He writes in this kind of explosive article that came out Sunday, the opinion piece in Politico, Quote, there are very likely more shoes to drop in short order, with even bigger bombshell stories coming this week. Key Pentagon reporters have been telling sources privately. Of course, John Oliot is a Trump supporter. He's trying to defend the administration, but even he is calling out this massive dysfunction in the Pentagon. I was hoping you can give us like your assessment of the overall situation within the Department of Defense.
Why would we be surprised? You know, he's the singularly least qualified person to ever be nominated as a Secretary of Defense. I said during the confirmation hearings and before it that he was disqualified by any number of things, but you know, notwithstanding the fact that I contacted two Democratic members of the Senate Armed Services Committee, they voted in favor of him, and the Republicans in the Senate went right along. There's nothing in his background to say that he's qualified to occupy this position. He was a major in the National Guard, and the military operates at 4 levels: the tactical, the operational, the strategic, and the geopolitical. His experience is completely at the tactical. To go from the tactical to the geopolitical is just ridiculous. I mean, there's no way you can do it. He's on the job training, and stubbing your toe or making major mistakes would be expected. One of my big disappointments was with the prior secretaries of defense, for instance, Panetta and Gates, who didn't speak up during the confirmation hearing, who didn't speak up when he was nominated. Had they spoken up and said, here's what's required to be successful in the job, we might have had a meaningful dialogue in the Senate Armed Services Committee, but instead we focused on alcoholism and womanizing. He was a Fox News commentator before coming to the Secretary of Defense. Hardly qualifies you, but it's not surprising at all that we would have the mayhem that we do. The other thing is that he fired a number of people. Fired the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, fired 2 female admirals, and fired other people, and there's just disarray. So the fact there's disarray in the Pentagon is not at all surprising to me.
Right, and now there seems to be a purge of staff under him. The story about why that is exactly. I've heard some water cooler talk about them being not like loyalists, but that also doesn't make sense because guys like Dan Caldwell and his other aides that were dismissed have been longtime allies of his. There was some talk about like leaking information during the Department of Defense investigation on Signalgate. Their names came up, but they are also contesting wrongful termination. So it just seems like absolute chaos.
It is, and there's any number of theories on why people are doing what they're doing. It may have had a sudden overwhelming obligation to conscience. It may be that they're revenge, but it's complete disarray.
And so, real quick before I get into what the impact of that disarray is on geopolitical issues, I'm just going to play this. This is SecDef's Pete Hegseth's response to the second Signalgate allegations about him literally not just having giving away 0 hour for operations in Yemen to a signal chat with a journalist, but to actual civilian personnel.
What do you want to say, sir, about the signal chat controversy?
You know, what a big surprise that a few leakers get fired and suddenly a bunch of hit pieces come out from the same media that peddled the Russia hoax. Won't give back their Pulitzers. They got Pulitzers for a bunch of lies. Pulitzers for a bunch of lies and on hoaxes time and time and time again. And as they peddle those lies, no one ever calls them on it. See, this is what the media does. They take anonymous sources from disgruntled former employees, and then they try to slash and burn people and ruin their reputations. Not going to work with me, because we're changing the Defense Department, putting the Pentagon back in the hands of warfighters, and anonymous smears from disgruntled former employees on old news doesn't matter. So I'm happy to be here at the Easter egg roll with my dad and my kids, because, you know, this is what we're doing it for. These kids right here. This is why we're fighting the fake news media. This is why we're fighting slash and burn Democrats. This is why we're fighting hoaxsters. Hoaxsters. This group, no, this group right here, full of hoaxsters that peddle anonymous sources from leakers with axes to grind, and then you put it all together as if it's some news story. And when we know exactly what it is. So I'm really proud of what we're doing for the president, fighting hard across the board, and I'm going to go roll some Easter eggs with my kids. Thank you.
That was a very rhetorically confusing answer. It went a number of places, and this is President Trump's response as of this Sunday. And there's been no further comment on the SecDef since this.
Thank you very much. I have spoken to the president, and we are going to continue fighting on the same page all the way. Come on, guys. Let's go.
Oh, sorry, that was a different clip. Well, essentially, President Trump said, we're going to stick it out. And they may be shopping for a new SecDef right now, but at least everyone's towing the line publicly within the administration.
There's a couple of things that strike me in that. The first one is that his pronouncement of blaming it on the media is Trump repeating himself. I mean, Trump did this for years and years, and he continues to do it. The facts are being distorted. But the other thing is that, if we are to have another Secretary of Defense, if Hegseth doesn't make it and he's fired, well, what's the prospect that we're going to get anything more significantly different? I mean, who is a reputable national security expert who would align himself with the Trump administration, knowing what he has to get into? First of all, no one has benefited from aligning themselves with Trump, who was reputable to begin with. So you're not going to have a significant improvement. And if someone did come in, how long would they last? The other thing is that Hegseth has aligned himself with Trump for a long time. I read his most recent book. And three things struck me in the most recent book. First thing,
sorry, General, that was the War on Warriors, right?
Oh, right. Three things struck me. Usually on the back of a book like that, you see endorsements. There are no endorsements, not a one. There are no footnotes. And there's an upside-down American flag on the front, which tells me that it's not a book. It's a manifesto that appealed to one person, Donald Trump.
Right, and I guess what have we seen from him in the past 90 days? I just remember the Democrats lambasted him over his personal failings, as if they should have known that wouldn't sway the Senate committee's vote at all, based off of like his drinking or his philandering or whatever you call it. Instead, they didn't really, they could have drilled down on more professional issues, like the fact that he didn't even, because I was there, I was in the Senate when this meeting happened, he didn't even know what a SOFA agreement was. And for the audience, that's like a status of forces agreement, which are the international treaties that define the legal status of military personnel and their dependents when stationed in a foreign country. I would say that's like one of the primary things that in terms of like paperwork that the Secretary of Defense does. He didn't even know what that was. Somehow I, as an enlisted guy, did know. So, yeah.
It's a shame. I mean, we have an amateur running the largest part of the government. $850 billion a year we spend on it. We have 2.3 million people involved. We have an amateur running it, an amateur who's arrogant and ignorant.
Right, and what he's done in the past 90 days was essentially get rid of DEI. Of course, fired the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, got rid of 4-star admirals who just happened to be women, erasing the Navajo wind talkers from the World War II Pacific Theater from government websites. I think also the Tuskegee airmen got removed. So anything that's
Jackie Robinson
and Jackie Robinson. So you've mentioned multiple times that 24% of the armed services are composed of women. I think about a quarter of the Army is Black. And that combined with the dysfunction happening in the nerve center of the entire military, i.e. the Pentagon. How do you think, I mean, it's kind of a rhetorical question at this point, but like, how do you think this affects force readiness, and will we see the effects of that in any sort of tangible ways in the future?
I think we will. I think we will. I think we'll see it, because I asked the rhetorical question: what high potential female or high potential African American would choose to join a Hegseth-led military, given what he's said and what he's done in the past 90 days? We already have a recruiting crisis in the military. We have marginally qualified people joining. We have a washout rate of 25% in the first year of enlistment in the Army. We have a crisis brewing, and it's not going to get any better with the Hegseth-led military. You have to wonder, if you're a really high quality woman and you're thinking about joining the military, why would you want to spend a career in a Hegseth-led military?
Being a
secondhand
citizen, essentially,
or an African American,
right? And so I think you mentioned that he hasn't really existed in anything above the tactical level, operational, strategic, and geopolitical. I think now that there's this tumult happening, we are massing assets in shifting a carrier battle group to the Persian Gulf, a second one. Of course, this happened under the Biden administration. There's been a lot of hubbub about massing B-2 bombers, like half our fleet, out of the air base in Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean, that we hope is out of hypersonic striking distance from Iran. But like, how does this, my question that I really want to hone in on to, like, from your command experience, how would this kind of internal dissent affect what's going on throughout the world in terms of U.S. military posture?
It makes the military service even less attractive to young people who might choose to join. The other thing is it emboldens our enemies, our potential enemies, because there's a disarray. There's a dissent inside the Pentagon that says we're not in agreement. We're not capable of putting together a plan. I have to wonder, what's the process? There are pretty sophisticated processes within the National Security Agency that get a number of agencies involved. I gotta think that process is dead. So we're flying by the seat of our pants right now.
Have you seen it? Like, well, you were outspoken against the Iraq war, I believe. And was it, I think you mentioned in the town hall speech that you technically were laid off for DEI purposes because Donald Rumsfeld asked you to resign or something like, am I getting the story right?
Yeah, that's basically it. I was told my services were no longer wanted.
Okay.
Well, that's not uncommon. I mean, there's a number of general and flag officers who've been, you serve at the pleasure of the President and the Secretary of Defense. I realize that. And I frankly have enjoyed the time that I've had. I got directly involved in the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell and other things. So I've been satisfied that I've continued to operate in compliance with my oath of office to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
Right. So that being said, and, in the lead up to the Iraq war, in the confusion of that, the manufacturing of consent to deploy, which you clearly had a problem with, have you seen this amount of disarray within the U.S. military?
No, never. I think that I think this is unique, and it's completely. I mean, if you look at the entire cabinet, I don't think there's a single nominee who would have been nominated by another incoming president. I don't think any of them are really qualified to occupy the positions that they do. And if anything, I criticize the Republicans in the Senate for the disarray that's there. I mean, they could have made rational decisions and taken a look at qualifications, but instead they're more concerned with their incumbency than their loyalty to their oath to support and defend the Constitution. And it's pretty clear to me that it'll be interesting to see if Hegseth does get fired, how that experience will affect the next consideration for the confirmation of a follow-on Secretary of Defense.
Yeah, I'd be interested to know who's on that short list. It seems like, after how am I forgetting? Oh, General Mattis left, and the administration, it doesn't seem like any serious military personnel would follow on after that.
No, and it's unlikely. I don't know why. When you think about it, why would a person who has real bona fides to serve as the Secretary of Defense serve in this administration? I mean, his or her qualifications would be counter to the head of the government and last maybe 6 months. But what you'll get is another sycophant who will be put up, and we'll see what the Senate does in terms of weighing their incumbency versus their oath. Yeah. I don't know a single person who I think would be inclined to take the job in good faith.
So do you envision then, if another Fox News correspondent, for instance, is put forward by the administration for the SecDef position, do you see an exodus of general officers from the command echelon exiting the Pentagon and other duty stations around?
No, I think that you won't see an exodus, but I think the real test will be in the Senate, whether they tolerate it or not, or whether they go along. But my experience is that most general and flag officers would rather stay and be a leveling or a balancing force than resign. And we've had very few resignations for principal.
Yeah. So, and if that happens, this kind of brings me to like the second segment. You mentioned in your town hall speech recently the rise of fascism, this dictator king, the concentration of wealth. And I get a lot of questions. There's a lot of fear going around with these ICE raids that are somewhat like paramilitary in nature. ICE, of course, has been completely militarized, and so has the police force. Well, basically since before the 60s, they were always a counterinsurgency force founded, in 1829 by the British. But a lot of people are concerned about the calling in of the National Guard, this idea that Trump could resurrect the Insurrection Act, which lets the president from 1807, which lets the president deploy the military domestically and use it for civil law enforcement. It's dangerously vague, in need of reform. So when you talk about the rise of fascism, are you concerned about eventual martial law if civilian unrest becomes, builds to a critical mass and a critical point? And what would the implementation of martial law look like? I tend to not be reactionary. So like when people are getting concerned about like troop deployments to Syria, all you have to do is like look up and see it's like a pre-planned National Guard rotation. So I try to be non-reactionary. I was just wondering what your thoughts were on this.
Well, I think that it depends what the reaction from the public is. So far, I think the reaction from the public has been very good, and it's been peaceful, it's been focused, it's been organized. But you can have a breakout of violence or whatever that may come from someone else, it may come from another source that's blamed on the protesters who are protesting peacefully and within the confines of the Constitution. It could be blown up, and he could implement martial law. In which case, we lose all of our constitutional rights, and we have a real problem, because we're headed for a constitutional crisis, perhaps right now, with his violation of Supreme Court rulings, and I think we'll see more of that.
Mm-hmm. And In the case that happens, you said you've seen very little, or very few, rather, resignations for moral reasons or principal reasons. Do you think that that would be kind of a call to action there for resignations?
I don't think so. I don't think so. You know, the thing is that most general and flag officers, in my experience, in my continued study of it, we don't fire them for failure. We fire them for sexual harassment or whatever, or you misuse an airplane or whatever. But we don't fire them for failure. We also don't have many resignations. I mean, the last resignation out of principle that I can think of is the guy in Korea during the Carter administration. But you know, we just don't have it. We have a kind of priesthood of general and flag officers that is a cloistered unit, and they don't resign and they don't get fired. Think about it. Who got fired for anything in Iraq or Afghanistan?
Wait, did Petraeus or was it McChrystal who did the Rolling Stone interview?
McChrystal.
Did he get fired for that?
Yeah, but he didn't get fired for performance. He got fired for insubordination.
Oh, okay.
We had a rotation of 17 3- and 4-star commanders in Afghanistan, a war that lasted for 20 years without resolution. No one was fired. No one was criticized. In Iraq, we lost. Who was criticized? Who paid a price for that? You know, Paul Yingling, Colonel Yingling, wrote a piece about 10 or 15 years ago where he said that a private who loses a rifle pays a bigger price for that than a general who loses a war.
Yeah, definitely mispriced sensitive items, and I feel like I got more flack for it than that. And isn't that one of the Trump administration's big appeals, to kind of break the power of these generals that have been there forever? The idea of the deep state, these CIA officials who have been in since the Bay of Pigs, doesn't seem like they've really done anything to do that. That was one of their stated campaign goals, and a lot of the MAGA supporters want to like kind of break the power of these like legacy Pentagon officials who were never punished for anything, or the Afghan withdrawal, even though that was more of a political move than a military. That just hasn't happened. And do you actually see that happening, or is it just a talking point?
I think it's a talking point. I think if you look at it, in the context of the highest levels of the Pentagon, you have the civil military industrial complex that dictates how much we spend and who we spend it with. And it's kind of a giant self-licking ice cream cone. You know, you get people buying weapons from Raytheon, and Raytheon making contributions to election campaigns. So the roots are too deep to really address effectively.
Yeah. And of course, Pete Hegseth's rebuttal to that is, you know, I'm trying to shake things up here, so you know, I'm being persecuted by the internal politics of the Pentagon.
No, I don't buy it at all. I don't buy it at all. I think the criticism that he's undergone is absolutely justified, and I can say that. But here's the thing, you know, the guy who will have to make a decision as to whether the national security was jeopardized as a result of these phone calls. Look what he did at Mar-a-Lago. I mean, if he fired Pete Hegseth for that, he indicts himself. That
is a good point. But again, it doesn't seem like he's too scared of hypocrisy. So, you know, it's kind of what's kind of bizarre about this administration is there's always been this beltway tradition or understanding. It's like, if you embarrass your boss or cause such a political scandal that it affects the implementation of government policy, either foreign or domestic policy, you resign. And unlike the last administration, where there's been a lot of turnover, where a lot of people got fired, it seems like they're all towing the line in this administration, which is interesting.
They're all towing the line because we knew what they were before they were nominated. They were nominated because they towed the line. You look at the things they've said. There isn't a single one of them in the cabinet who didn't accommodate Trump's position during the campaign. I mean, there's not a one. We know exactly what we were getting.
So you're not surprised about how
Absolutely not.
Is shaken down or anything so far?
Absolutely not. Not at all. Not at all. I mean, why would you expect something different? Think about what they said. Think about the outrageous things that Pam Bondi said prior to the election. Think about the things that the guy who heads the FBI, Kash Patel, said. Think about the things that Hegseth said. You know, all of them are sycophants before they were nominated. That's the reason they were nominated.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's why so many people circling back to these quote unquote whistleblower leaks, like Dan Caldwell and the other three senior officials in the Pentagon that were fired, not because they were leaking anything, but because they were potentially voicing some sort of internal dissent that was not appreciated at that time.
I think there's a strong case that may come out if there's a genuine investigation. But you know, the IGs have all been fired. I mean, who's the cop on the beat now? The IGs have been fired. The DOJ has been compromised. The FBI has been compromised. You have the president telling the DOJ to look into two truth tellers. The guy who was the head of cybersecurity, and the guy who worked for Homeland Security's chief of staff, directing them to be no charges, no crime. It's nothing but retribution, and they're doing it.
Yeah. So I basically only see it getting worse here. They're trying to systematically dismantle any checks that can be placed on them. You mentioned the oath of service in your town hall speech, you know, to defend the Constitution from all enemies, foreign and domestic. I don't know. Do you see the military in any way playing a role in that? Again, you said, you know, people follow orders, generals don't resign. Like any hope from that precinct?
I don't know. We may see it if it gets bad enough, but I think there's enough. There are a lot of things that can be done to throw sand into the gears before that resignation occurs.
Could you give us an example?
Yeah, you can be a whistleblower.
Mm-hmm.
You can delay things. You can publicize dumb ideas. For instance, the parade that they want to have in Washington.
Yes. So let me give some context for that. Yeah, Donald Trump wants a authoritarian. Well, he wants a military parade for his birthday, which kind of coincides with the Army's day of founding. But yes, he wants a military parade ostensibly for himself, which gives very authoritarian warning bells, to say the least. So yes, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, so there's one example. I mean, it's you know, the people in Washington D.C. The mayor has come out with a problems in, and then some people in the Pentagon have said it costs $90 million. Will destroy the roads even worse and make them even worse than they are in Washington right now.
Would he destroy the roads because he wants to drive down tank divisions or something?
Yeah.
Okay. Wow, that's insane.
You know, what we haven't talked about too is the Veterans Administration and what's happening there.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Pete Hegseth has actually intimated that he wants to privatize the Veterans Affairs. So yeah, I would love to hear your thoughts on what the Trump administration's plans for the Veterans Affairs Administration is. I rely on it for my health care. So,
well, I think the objective is to make it so ineffective that it becomes obvious that it has to be canned. It's almost in its entirety. What we have now is a community-based experiment in community-based healthcare for veterans, and it makes sense where there's a long drive from a veterans home to a hospital, where you can have veterans care be taken care of by a civilian. But the difference between veterans care and the community context in the VA itself is dramatic. It's not nearly as effective. They don't have the tools, the experience with PTSD and suicides. But what will happen is that you'll see it privatized, and gee, what will happen? One of the oligarchs who's aligned with the administration will take it over, and there will be a profit that is gleaned by the private takeover of the Veterans Affairs, and veterans will be less effectively dealt with in taking care of their needs.
Yeah, and that's also another big factor in the recruiting crisis. Just to circle back to the beginning of the segment, it's like, I don't know, like all the younger generations watch the global war on terror veterans not get the best treatment, horrendous suicide rates, and now just like growing up, after the VA gets dismantled and is privatized, and you have to pay a fee. So many veterans are already broke anyways. Seeing more homeless veterans on the street, they're not going to want to join. It seems like the entire thing's in cascade failure, and there is a concern about an eventual draft if it gets bad enough.
That'd be interesting. I've said since 2013 when I wrote my book, Skin in the Game, Poor Kids and Patriots, that a draft was required, and I think now we're seeing the effects of it. I mean, the recruiting crisis that's occurred the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force to some degree over the past couple of years is evident of that. But if we let's just take a look at it and say that let's say that China invaded Taiwan tomorrow, how many people would rush to the recruiting office to sign up?
I wouldn't.
I think that another piece of it is that the principal reason, and this is government data, this is a government survey that they ran. The principal reason that people don't enlist is the fear of getting killed. So if we can't get people to enlist during peacetime, what's the chance that they're going to enlist during wartime? And the chance of being killed is dramatically different, dramatically increased. We're whistling in the graveyard.
Whistling in the graveyard, yeah. I think you wrote in that. I think it was the piece you co-authored with Colonel Larry Wilkerson about the draft, or was that just your?
Yeah, Larry and I have written a number of things on the draft.
Yeah, well, one of them you talked about how actually having a draft would incentivize, just like in Vietnam, for the average American to become involved in U.S. foreign policy as well.
We've excused the first socioeconomic quintile from military service effectively. The majority of the enlisted soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines today are from the third and fourth socioeconomic quintiles, and they're people who may not have other alternatives, but large part of them are poor kids and some patriots. But we have a poverty draft in some cases.
Yeah, where the only way to escape is military service.
It's one that gives medical care and three squares a day in most cases. But we have, there's a book written by two scholars called The Casualty Gap about how the deaths in the wars going from World War II to Iraq and Afghanistan has gotten larger and larger socioeconomically. And it's data. It's irrefutable data by two recognized scholars, not some dumb general from Columbus, Ohio, who said it. But it's hard data.
Yeah, I actually, as a personal anecdote, I definitely remember seeing that. I went to a boarding school in New England, and on the chapel there was like all the people who died in the wars, and from World War II, it was like all these people from the upper socioeconomic class. Vietnam or Korea, kind of similar. Vietnam, far less, almost like nothing. And then everything after that, that's just about it. One guy from Desert Storm. That's it. So yeah, that's basically what we've been looking. So when you talk about conscription, and you also mentioned Trump being a draft dodger, there would be like a no exception policy, no exemption policy. That's the only way it can work.
I think when people in the United States look at the draft, they have the only context they have is the Vietnam draft, which I think is the most unfair draft that we could have had. I mean, if I sat there and was charged with writing an unfair draft, that's the one I would have put together. We exempted everyone from who went to college. We exempted various people that you could get into with a doctor and you could buy off. But it's clearly the most unfair draft we had.
Mm-hmm. And it's an interesting idea. I wish we were less militant and less interventionalist. And it's my abiding frustration that the average American voter is not that interested or affected by foreign policy decisions of our government. But those affect us, the average working American, just like domestic policy decisions do as well. So to kind of like circle back to the beginning, SecDef may get replaced, probably not going to be replaced by anyone competent. There'll still be dissent within the Pentagon. Maybe we'll see some whistleblowers, the leaking of stupid ideas. People might get prosecuted for that. The recruiting crisis will continue. The draft may, in the future, years from now, the implementation of a draft may cause a lot of domestic dissent. A lot of people want a stop to U.S. interventionism. And, a lot of people in MAGA world talk about like America first, but also having like a peace through strength doctrine. And then people more like on the political left just kind of like want the entire system to be rendered ineffective to a place where we can no longer exert like imperial control. Do you see the military still maintaining effectiveness going forward? Do you think it'll be able to be maintained, or do you think we're kind of in a downward spiral cascade failure that we can't really return from?
I think the dichotomy that you just outlined is a little too clean. But let me answer that another way. I think that in addition to the issues that we talked about in going to war, be it with Russia, Iran, or North Korea or China, there are three things that are required to be effective and prosecute a war: manpower, material, and money. Material, we can't build ships. We have a major problem in terms of the industrial base that supports the military today. We can't build ships, and it's a well-known problem. I mean, it's the shipbuilders have been before the Senate Armed Services Committee. They've given testimony that we can't do it. And the other one is money. We're $35 trillion in debt. So, once before I retired, I made a comment in an open forum. I said, we can't go to war with China. And someone said, why not? And I said, because they won't loan us the money to fight them. I mean, think about it. I think in crude terms, we have an alligator's mouth and a chipmunk's ass.
Yeah, and we're seeing that play out in the war in Ukraine, for instance. That's really exposed problems with our industrial base.
We almost ran the Ukrainians out of 155 millimeter shells.
Mm-hmm.
Almost ran them out completely.
Yeah. I mean, they were firing 10,000 a day some days, but yeah. So I guess Trump's tariff policy is meant to reindustrialize America. That takes time. But do you see America getting reindustrialized from a military perspective?
Be very expensive. And the other thing is, too, that when we talk about reindustrializing the military, I'm right now, I'm most concerned with China, because I think the tariff wars could possibly escalate into a kinetic war. And that's what concerns me the most. You have two superpowers going at one another, and both of them wanting to be the supreme power. One of them is an incumbent, the other is a challenger. And I'm concerned that the tariff wars could get out of hand and could become kinetic.
And the best we could hope for that would be like a limited conflict over the Strait of Taiwan.
Oh, come on. No, I think my fear is that if we did get into a war with China, that there would be a standoff of sorts. And my greatest fear is that one of the two would say, we have all these nuclear weapons, let's use them.
Yeah, I guess the biggest optimist the optimist in me would hope for, like, there have been two examples of border clashes between nuclear powers, India and China, and the USSR, that didn't go nuclear, but they were resolved speedily. So I don't know. Hopefully.
I mean, it's a possibility, and it's, you know, when you sit in the Pentagon and you do the analysis, you always do a ends, ways, and means analysis. But once a course of action is chosen, you say what's the possibility of it happening, and what's the severity of the course of action. Now, the possibility may be small. Severity is existential.
Mm-hmm.
I think we need to take every step we can to avoid nuclear confrontation.
Right. And speaking of that, there has been an abiding concern over the war in Ukraine for escalation to a critical point where nuclear arms would be used. I definitely believe that could be disintegrating a little bit. The Trump administration has a different, I guess, spin on Ukraine. I don't think they're generally like sincere, or at least their negotiating position isn't sincere in terms of actually resolving the conflict speedily. But I do think, I don't know, do you think we've gone down the escalation ladder with regards to Russia?
Well, we've conceded a lot to Russia. I mean, we've given them everything they've. If you look at the nature of the negotiations, the first negotiation took place, and it was just the United States and Russia.
Mm-hmm.
Ukrainians were exempted from it. You know, the administration got a hold of Zelensky after and briefed him, but I think the relationship between Trump and Putin says that it's unlikely that we're going to take a hard stance against Putin and force him to make major concessions. He hasn't done so to this point. I doubt he will.
Yeah, and in the meantime, the war will continue.
And it's a brutal war. I mean, the war in Ukraine is just it's slaughter. The only greater slaughter is probably in Gaza.
Mm-hmm. And I saw you put out a piece on the absurdity of Trump, and we can end on there. I always like to bring up Gaza and the ongoing humanitarian catastrophe going on there. The IDF has reinitiated military operations in the Strip in conjunction with cutting off aid in its entirety. Of course, through open source, we know that clashes between Hamas within the Strip and the IDF have recommenced. U.S. support for that. When you were in the military, was it ever thinkable to cut off U.S. funding or support militarily for Israel based on their belligerence?
Well, the belligerence has gone on for quite a while, but it's escalated with the Netanyahu administration. And if you look at the cabinet, it's the most conservative, hawkish cabinet ever put together by the Israeli government. And the question I ask often when I speak to audiences is, what strategic advantage accrues to the United States as a result of our unabiding support of Israel? Nothing.
Yeah, I just hear a talking point. They're our greatest ally in the region, but we have allies in the region.
What do we get from the alliance? What strategic advantage accrues to the United States as a result of our unquestioned support of Israel?
Well, if I was going to, as an exercise, walk through the talking points, it's like they fight the terrorism in West Asia and Iran, so we don't have to. Of course, it's brain rot, but that is the talking point.
Well, it's I think it is brain rot, but it puts the United States. I mean, our hands are dirty as could be in Gaza and other places, and we need to come to grips with it. I mean, it's you talk about the Pentagon, but we have a just bigger problem in the State Department and being realistic. If you want to read a good book on the Iraq War, read Dennis Fritz's book, Betrayal.
Betrayal, Dennis Fritz. Oh, isn't he also associated with Eisenhower Media Network?
Yes. I mean, it's compelling. It's compelling, but it's an inside story that You need to as part of being aware of what our government does and why they do it.
Mm-hmm. And it's not generally for the reasons that they say they're doing it. So
we put a benevolent spin on it.
Mm-hmm. So, well, there's certainly a lot going on. We're going to have to watch these Pentagon developments. Of course, it's kind of been floated by the press that there's more bombshells awaiting later this week, and I'm sure not flattering to the administration or the current Defense Department. Yeah, the SecDef. So I wouldn't be surprised if he had to get replaced. Although, you would have thought that Mike Walls, National Security Advisor, after the embarrassment that was Signalgate, he would have got relieved, or he would have been asked to resign and gone into the private sector. But that doesn't happen. So I guess you just can't be sure.
What we can be sure of, though, is that it'll be a test of the Senate Armed Services Committee, whether they make the same mistake that they did before with the confirmation of Hegseth.
Yeah, so just have to wait and see, and time will tell. And apparently, it doesn't seem like any of these issues are going to be fixed. So
time will tell, but the clock is ticking.
Mm-hmm.
The clock is ticking, and we have major problems in the military and major problems in the geopolitical sense, and it's not none of them are getting any better.
Right. And, before I end, I would just like to say, this is we're almost at the end of the administration's first 100 days. That's usually when most of the initiatives get put forward, and they've just been bogged down in controversy the entire time.
I think it's a function of the incompetence.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you have incompetent zealots who are way over their head.
Yeah. So more of the circus to follow, I believe. So Major General Dennis Laich, thanks so much. You can find his writings in op-eds, The Hill, Eisenhower Media Network, and more. Thank you so much for coming on and joining us here at MinPress News and State of Play.
Thanks. I appreciate the opportunity.
All right, y'all. Well, that is a wrap for today. We will be back next week for a weekly breakdown of whatever news was missed on the weekend. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.